In defiance to the international community, Houthi rebels attack Mecca hours before the UN envoy arrival. United Nations Security Council imposes sanctions on Houthi leaders. Houthi rebels storm the United States Embassy in Sanaa. Welcome to Yemen Today TV. This is the English news with me, Shaza Abdullah. UN envoy to Yemen Hans Grunberg arrived in the city of Mecca, west of Taz. Grunberg met with Brigadier Abdullah Saleh, the leader of the national resistance in the west coast. During the meeting, Saleh repeated that the solution in Yemen depends on halting Houthi attack and shelling on Ma'rib. For his part, Grunberg expressed his happiness to meet the leader of the national resistance. Previous to the arrival of the UN envoy to Mecca, the Houthi militia targeted residential neighborhoods in the city. Local sources reported that the Houthi militia targeted populated areas on the outskirts of Mecca with 3 missiles, causing a state of fear and panic among civilians. The UN Security Council will hold tomorrow a closed session to discuss the developments in Yemen. United Nations envoy Hans Grunberg is expected to brief the Council on the results of his visit inside and outside Yemen. For his part, the humanitarian coordinator David Greasley will also brief the Security Council on worsening humanitarian catastrophe in the country. The UN Security Council sanctioned 3 other Houthi leaders. The decision issued by the Sanctions Committee added the Houthi leaders for their role in destabilizing Yemen. Members of the Houthi militia stormed the United States Embassy building in Sanaa. On the same line, a spokesperson for the U.S. State Department said Washington is aware of reports that the Houthi militia has arrested some of its local employees.
What I can say at this point is that we are extremely concerned by reports of detentions of some of our local Yemeni employees in Sanaa, and we call for their immediate release. We have been unceasing in our behind-the-scenes diplomatic efforts to secure their release. We've seen some progress, and we're continuing to work this critical issue. The majority of those who have been detained are no longer in custody. We are committed to ensuring the safety of those who serve the U.S. government overseas, and that is why we are so actively engaged on this matter, including through our international partners.
And do you know how many in total were detained and why?
I don't have any update I'm in a position to relay at this time, but again, the majority of them have been released, and when we have more details to share, we will. Yes, Laura.
To Ma'rib, the Iranian-backed Houthi militia deployed more fighters coming from Hajjah and Amran to the fighting fronts. On Harib front, government forces recovered a number of sites from the Houthi militia. Military sources indicated that 17 Houthi militants were killed in an ambush set by government forces. In addition, the artillery of the government forces targeted gatherings of Houthis in separate locations, causing the destruction of 2 vehicles and killing those inside them. In Sirwah front, government forces broke a Houthi attack, resulting in losses in lives and equipment among Houthis. The number of internally displaced people in Ma'rib increased to more than 93,000 during September and October. The new numbers were recorded by the Executive Unit for the Management of IDPs camps in its latest report, citing that the Houthi escalation in southern Ma'rib was behind the new waves of displacement. War in Yemen has affected civilians the most. International reports said numbers of civilian victims due to the ongoing war are increasing. More on the story is within this report.
7 years of war drove Yemen to be the worst humanitarian crisis in the world. Almost 5 million people have been displaced by fighting, and 4 out of 5 people are in need of humanitarian assistance. Official figures say that conflict has so far caused the death of more than 12,000 civilians. Nearly 4 million people have been forced to flee their homes due to the bombing and fighting. In a joint statement, a number of international aid agencies in Yemen warned against the increasing humanitarian needs in Ma'rib due to the Houthi escalation. Aid agencies outlined that the current humanitarian needs go beyond their capabilities. Oxfam, Save the Children, Care and other aid agencies said during the past month, civilians' casualties due to the Houthi escalation increased by 230%, including women and children. They called for an urgent international intervention to protect civilians. During the past month, more than 54 armed incidents have affected civilians in Ma'rib. These incidents killed more than 119 civilians in a single month. The international aid agencies said that displacement camps in Ma'rib are crowded, with fear that this may increase social violence in return. They cited that they are continuing to operate in a challenging environment with a massive shortage of funds. They called on all parties of the conflict in Yemen to reaffirm their obligations under international humanitarian law relating to humanitarian access and the protection of civilians.
The war is not the only cause of hardship in Yemen. People are suffering daily from the rising prices of fuel. More on the story is within this report.
The suffocating fuel crises continue amid deterioration of local currency, which exacerbates the hardship of Yemenis. The Yemeni market receives the shipments of oil at a new price amid lack of liquidity of foreign currencies. China's work of the Yemeni oil company that said the main reason behind high prices is the continuous rise in oil prices in the world market.
Yemen Oil Company suffers from a continuous rise in the prices of oil in the world, changes in the currency rates and deterioration of the national currency. We hope that there will be a decline in the international oil prices and stability of currency rates, which will lead to a decrease in prices of oil derivatives in the country.
Aden streets witnessed the closure of Yemeni oil company gasoline stations, while the company expects that there will be no fuel crisis. Meanwhile, prices of 20 liters of petrol have reached approximately 22,000 riyals, amid citizens' hopes for a drop in gasoline prices.
We don't expect a crisis as long as there is abundance of oil derivatives, but we are now negotiating with suppliers in order to earn acceptable prices and large quantities to push it into local market.
Today, while we are in the street of Aden, we find that some stations of the state oil company are closed, and this is for the third day in a row. We call on the local authorities to try to solve this problem, which has created a state of anger.
Stifling fuel crisis besiege citizens despite high prices of commodities and food products. Citizens say that the cause of the crisis is the political conflict between political factions in Aden.
Rise in price of oil products in Aden led to an increase in suffering of the citizen due to high prices of transportation between regions. In addition, food supplies price increase. The reason is because political faction did not implement Riyadh agreement faster. We hope so much to implement the Riyadh agreement as soon as possible to normalize the situation in Aden.
The Yemeni citizen continues to suffer in all aspects of life, especially from the lack of oil products, which has continued since the outbreak of war, where sometimes prices of oil products rise and sometimes the oil cease to exist, amid the absence of real directives to address the situation on the part of the local authorities.
Coming next. The European Union condemns with the strongest terms the attack on a female journalist and her husband in Aden.
لا بشيء هذا هو محل استهداف الحواث الذين استهدفوا المواطنين وهم نائمين. هذا هو الصاروخ من الساعة 4 ما سمعنا الضربة من الحوثيين في المخيم. هذا يعني استشهدوا أولاد عمي، هذا استشهدوا يعني أخواني كلهم، يعني شوف يعني الدم في الخيم. الدم في الخيم يعني في كل مكان، يعني رؤوسهم ما التقوش، الرأس ما التقاش، الرأس ما التقاش. الحمد لله يرحمني.
Welcome back. The European Union condemned the car bomb that killed the pregnant journalist Rasha. The EU called upon authorities to bring criminals to justice. The explosion took place through an explosive device that was planted in her car. For his part, Interior Minister Ibrahim Haidan directed the security services in Aden to quickly hunt the journalist's murders. He identified the attack stands the hallmarks of the Houthi rebels, stressing the importance of raising security awareness in Aden. To that end, Yemeni journalist syndicate condemned in the strongest terms the unmatched crime against journalist Rasha and her husband. The syndicate expressed its concern that Rasha's assassination would foretell a new phase of targeted journalists in Yemen without accountability. Yemeni journalists suffer no less than the rest of the Yemeni people from this ugly war. They face life risks to document hardship of Yemenis. More on the story is within this report.
Yemen has been witnessing in what is described as the worst humanitarian crisis in the world, were it not for media and journalists. By reporting and documenting the suffering of Yemenis in a war-torn country, the United Nations or international community would not have described it as such. Regardless the ruthless Houthi repressive machine that know nothing but violations, the Yemeni journalists desperately report and document the facts from the ground. Meanwhile, the Yemeni Journalist Syndicate said that the Yemeni journalist is facing arbitrary measures, of which are the execution sentence of 4 of our fellow journalists, Abdullah Umran, Tawfiq al-Mansouri, Akram al-Walidi, Harith Hamid, in a dangerous precedent. From 2015 until the third quarter of 2021, media freedoms were subjected to 1,359 violations, including 38 cases of murder. Many journalists lost their jobs while dozens were dismissed. Hundreds of salaries were suspended. Dozens of media outlets were closed and hundreds of websites were blocked. Houthis committed 841 violations, which are accounted for 63.2%, while other conflict parties committed 490 violations, which are accounted to 36.9%. From 2011 to October this year, 44 journalists, photographers and media employees were killed. Yemeni journalists are among other Yemenis who are affected by war, yet they are subjected to extra violations despite threats they face trying to convey suffering of Yemeni people.
Women's Development Center in Abyan is finally back to life. More on the story is within this report.
After being exposed to a number of devastating events as a result of the war in Abyan Governorate and the events during the past years, the Women Development Center resumed its activities again in the presence of representatives from the Ministry of Education after its rehabilitation.
I'm very pleased to be in Abyan Governorate. Khanfar City, in the building center of the literacy and adult education system, was considered the regional center in the Middle East. Used to be managed by one of the expertise in the field of literacy from Sudan. This center has been subjected to a lot of setbacks and destruction from war, which Abyan Governorate has witnessed. Today, I'm very happy that this center has been reopened again and returned back to life. Sewing and knitting halls are now opened, which will hopefully be a good start for everyone.
The beginning of the establishment of the center goes back to the year 1975 as the first building center in the Arabian Peninsula and the Middle East, as confirmed by those concerned, which contains a sewing and knitting workshops in addition to a mini meeting room and equipped with sewing and knitting machines.
Today, the training and rehabilitation hall of the Literacy Center in Abyan Governorate has been reopened, and we hope that all concerned organizations, institutions and associations support us to intensify this activity. Today we have 15 machines and we have a plan to increase this number to more than 40. However, this will not be able to happen without the cooperation of the concerned organizations and local authorities.
This center aims to train and rehabilitate women and provide them with professional skills in the field of sewing and knitting, which will contribute to improving their standard of living and reducing poverty.
I have joined this Literacy and Development Center to benefit myself, my daughters, and others. And hopefully we can join a sewing project in which we all benefit from and can be a successful project for us and for you.
Despite what these centers represent in terms of training and professional projects that benefit their beneficiaries, the people in charge of this center hope to achieve more support and assistance to achieve the goals of the center in rehabilitating as many women as possible in the field of sewing and self-reliance.
Here is a reminder of the main headlines. In defiance to the international community, Houthi rebels attack Mecca hours before the UN envoy arrival. United Nations Security Council imposes sanctions on Houthi leaders. Houthi rebels stormed the United States Embassy in Sanaa. This is the end of the news. Thank you for watching.